Hi, thanks for coming again. This is essentially the last chapter. I'm going to do my best to get through all 35 sutras. What's interesting is that this is the shortest chapter. I guess it's actually 34. Okay, so this is 3/4 of the book. The last chapter is just this. It summarizes and goes to the final stages of realization. It's called Kevala. Let me read what Swami Satchidananda says about this chapter. Okay. Kevala Pada, portion on absoluteness. Book 4 has the heading Kevala Pada, or the portion that talks about absoluteness. The root of Kevalam is Kevala, which means without qualities or conditions. That which is cosmic. And you've heard me talk about the crystal mind. The one who has the quality of Kevala is called Kevalam. It's the experience of absoluteness, unlimitedness. So this is a negative of being limited. When you say something's absolute, that means there's nothing beyond it. Well, yes and no. Once the mind has been trained and you leave it behind, there's nothing else you have to do to enjoy being in the state of Samadhi all the time. That's where the Turiya comes. And Satchidananda makes a point saying that you leave it behind. You leave all the changes in the mind behind. Okay, so this is mostly about mental states. Just a quick note. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna makes the point in talking to Arjuna that maybe only one person that seeks God out of 1,000,000 actually comes to know Him in truth. This is the chapter dealing with the 1 in 1,000,000. So you should pat yourself on the back even to be able to reading this. Give you some idea just on a statistical basis. There's 7 billion people on the planet. The maximum number of people that can be realized is 7,000. And you can see some inkling of that on the first comment video I made on this. There's only 34 after a couple of weeks. Yogananda said it best, I think. Rather than a crowd, he would rather have realized souls or spiritual people. But he did say, yes, I would like to have a crowd of spiritual souls. And I can tell you that to be associated with people that are on the spiritual path is a real joy. Okay, well here we go. Let's see if we can do it. The very first thing that he says, Patanjali, cities are born of practices performed in previous births, or by herbs, mantra repetition, asceticism, or by Samadhi. So he's naming a whole slew of things. He talked about using Samadhi to attain the cities. And one of the reasons he talks about this is because this is what comes after this. It comes after the cities. Everybody gets tried by God by giving them cities to see if they can absolutely put them in the right place. And it may take lifetimes. So Satchidananda mentions LSD and marijuana. He also mentions that he did this commentary because his students asked him. Okay. Well, I was asked too. But there's a special flavor between what my commentary and what his is. He doesn't talk about the Satya Yuga. And if you go back to Sri Yukteswar's The Holy Science, we are going into a Satya Yuga. And the Satya Yuga, it comes, okay, so there's Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, Kali Yuga. And Kali Yuga is the lowest Yuga, okay, the hardest to do spiritual activity. And then it switches over to the Satya Yuga again. That's the cycle. Okay, so this commentary is done with the intention to put Patanjali's Yoga Sutras in conjunction with the coming Satya Yuga. So we'll mention that again further. Number 2, the transformation of one species into another is brought about by the inflow of nature. Now Satchidananda doesn't comment on this directly. He waits until he does the 3rd sutra. Incidental events do not directly cause natural evolution. So incidental events just remove the obstacles as a farmer removes the obstacles in a watercourse running to his field. So this was written down at a time after the agrarian revolution had started and people were farming. Okay, that's why Patanjali mentions it. Okay? Incidental events just remove the obstacles as a farmer removes the obstacles in a watercourse running to his field. So, when the ideal way to farm is to have a body of water higher than your field. And so what the farmer does is actually open little channels and allow the water to irrigate different parts of the field. Okay, so what he does is what he would do is you have a little earthen dam, you'd have a hose, he'd pull the water, the dirt out of the way, and the water would just flow down. So Patanjali is saying, okay, our natural state is Samadhi. To make it appear, all you do is remove the obstacles, and then that life-giving water, the flow of the energy, okay, just manifests directly. And so the cities are just a part of that natural process. Okay, but he also says, back in 2, the transformation of one species into another is brought about by the inflow of nature. So this is where Patanjali predates Darwin. It says there's an evolutionary process, and the evolution happens by removing the obstacles. Okay, so that many far-reaching speculations can be taken from this. Okay, so we have a natural state inside us that manifests by just removing obstacles. Okay, in the chapter 3, you learned how to create cities. Now, here comes the really mind-bending stuff. Number 4, a yogi's egoti, or ego, state alone is the cause of other artificially created minds. Wow. You didn't know that computers was described by Patanjali 4,000 years ago, did you? Because a computer is essentially an artificial mind. You use an artificial language like Fortran or Python, and you create an object that simulates the thinking process. An artificially created mind. My God. Although the functions in the many created minds may differ, the original mind stuff of the yogi is the director of them all. Well, okay. Think about this just a little bit. Is a car, with all its computers, or an airplane, an artificially created mind? Well, actually, a plane on automatic pilot does a better job than a human of directing the plane. It sometimes even lands it. You know, like the space shuttle. Number 6. But Patanjali says that you can create an artificial mind through the use of the cities. And maybe we'll talk about it, maybe we won't. Number 6, only the minds born of meditation, the artificially created ones, are free from karmic impressions. Well, in some of the Vedas, there's a battle between the gods and the demons. And the demon king creates 3 artificially created beings. And because they were created, they don't have any sense of ego. So when they were fighting the gods, they could not be defeated, no matter how they tried. So they went to Narayana and they asked him, what can we do to defeat him? He says, well, retreat. And so they did, and they waited until these demons began to develop an ego, and then they became afraid that they would be killed. Okay, so there's an example of 6. Only the minds born of meditation are free from karmic impressions. Well, only temporarily in some of them. 7, the actions of the yogi are neither white, good, nor black, bad. But the actions of others are 3 kinds, good, bad, and mixed. So this is sattva, tamas, and rajas, good, bad, and mixed. Okay, well, how does it mean that the actions of a yogi are neither good or bad? Satchidananda, as a yogi, your actions are performed with such equanimity that you don't bring them into either category. You're above good and bad. And one of the things that you should learn from this is that Swami Satchidananda was accused of acting improperly with some of the students. Whether that was true or not, here he's saying, he said, I don't really care. You can believe what you want. Okay? And so you have to kind of, and there is a whole tradition in India that a realized being's actions are not accountable. And I actually believe part of that is true. You know, some of it isn't. It takes some discrimination. There's the story of Nityananda, a wandering sadhu who came to a village. Okay? People enjoyed having him around, and so the farmer who had listened to him talk that evening invited him to stay at his house, his farmhouse. He wasn't very wealthy, but he had room, and so he invited him to stay. The next morning when the Nityananda got up, the daughter of the farmer, and this is a tradition, she served Nityananda breakfast. Halfway through the breakfast, Nityananda got up, went to the fire, took a stick out of it with a burning coal, and went over to the girl and touched her with the coal and ran away. This is very strange behavior. Okay, so he never came back. And everybody was very astonished at this. It didn't really hurt the girl. It left a slight mark, singed some of the hair, and that was it. Next week, okay, so my question to you, this would seem to be bad karma, wouldn't it? Bad for him, bad for the girl. So they couldn't understand why somebody who seemed to be so good did something bad. The next week, an astrologer came by, and he actually would read people's fortunes and cast their charts and stuff. And the farmer invited him to stay overnight. So in the morning, after breakfast, he started to do the charts, and during the night, a cow died. It had died the previous week. So this is completely strange. And when he came to the girl's astrological chart, the astrologer said, my God, you were supposed to die last week in a fire. And then all of a sudden the light dawned. Nityananda had transferred the karma of the girl dying to the cow. So the karma was satisfied by him doing that. Okay, so let me ask you now, was this a good thing that happened to the girl? Absolutely. But to go back to this, but the action of the yogi is neither white nor black, good or bad. And so you see an instance of it. It sometimes was bad, sometimes it's good. But what's not covered in this statement is that the intention of the yogi is to do only good. And he will do things whether the consequences that he sees that he has to do whether it's good or bad. Let me give you another story about this. Narayana, in the story of the Ramayana, in the introduction, he talks to his gatekeeper, Jaya. He says to Jaya, I have to reincarnate back on earth to fulfill the promise that I made to the earth to restore Dharma and to reduce the overpopulation. Okay, and I would like you to come with me. And of course you've been cursed to go to earth 3 times, so this is the first time. Here's your choices. I would like you to come with me. And you can either be a very good person or a very bad person. Okay? If you're a good person, you won't see me at all during my stay on earth. If you become a bad person, you will think of me constantly, and I will kill you in the end. So Jaya thought for a minute, and he says, I want to be near you no matter what. So whether I'm a good person or a bad person, that's what I want. So I choose the bad person. And so he became Ravana. And he abducted Sita, and he was thinking about Ravana all the time. Anyway, so there's another backstory. Eight. Of these actions, so it doesn't matter whether they're good or bad for the yogi. Only those vasanas or subconscious impressions for which there are favorable conditions for producing their fruits will manifest in a particular birth. So here's the answer, why bad things happen to good people. Okay, you take out of your sack of karma. Okay, so this is where the foundation for karma comes from Patanjali in the 4th chapter. Okay, although desires are separated, number 9, although desires are separated from their fulfillments by class, space, and time, they have an uninterrupted relationship because the impressions of desires and memories of them are identical. So, past life are somehow you remember them. And we can go into some detail about how that happens, but here's the theoretical foundation for karma, the sun karma. 10. Since the desire to live is eternal, impressions are also beginningless. These impressions, okay, so impressions are also beginningless. Okay, number 9. The impressions and memories of them are identical. Number 11. This is an extremely important sutra. Satchidananda doesn't say anything about it, but we'll go into it a little bit. The impressions being held together by cause, effect, basis, and support, they disappear with the disappearance of these 4. Okay, here's a subtle clue how to manipulate karma. Okay, the impressions being held together by cause, effect, basis, and support. What happens if you take away the cause? Is there an effect? No, there's no effect. The basis may be there, and the support may be there, but there's no manifestation of the karma. So if you do a reframe and you have a different cause for some negative action, don't you just change that whole thing into a positive aspect? Reframing is a very powerful technique. Okay, another infill. 12. The past and future exist in the real form of objects which manifest due to differences in the conditions of their characteristics. Can you change your past and future? Just as saying, you change the condition of the characteristics, and the past and futures change. Now, there's only so much you can do to that. There's what's called the natural condition, naiti, and you can't change that completely. Okay, so whether your karmas or your conditions that create the karma are manifested or subtle, these characteristics belong to the nature of the gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. If you go look in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a whole chapter devoted to the gunas and how you can be free, liberated, even from the gunas. Number 14. The reality of things is due to the uniformity of the gunas' transformations. So, the gunas go from sattva, rajas, tamas. So the time between, so you can say an event is real because it slowly changes from sattva to rajas, and there's steps in between that you can enumerate. Another clue how to change reality. So if you just make the changes discontinuous, then you make that dreamlike because it's a sudden transformation. That's all that separates dreams from reality. Okay, another very powerful statement, 15. Due to differences in various minds, perception of even the same object will vary. You've seen that. Okay, so what this really says is that we share, you and I, a reality because we seem to be having the same object. You're looking at a picture of me, I'm looking at the camera taking a picture of me. Okay? So my perception of you is the camera first. Okay, so I have a different perception than somebody that's with you in the same room. Okay? I mean, there's lots of different ways you can go with this. Okay, so number 16. And this answers a philosophical argument in the last century. Nor does an object's existence depend upon a single mind, for if it did, what would become of that object when that mind did not perceive it? Okay, so this is the answer of the philosophical question. If there's a tree in the forest falls and no one sees it, did it really exist? Patanjali says, yes, it really exists, independent of those minds. Okay, so that must mean that they're... Okay, well, let's just take some of the thoughts, okay? Number 5. Although the function in the many created minds may differ, the original mind stuff of the yogi is the director of them all. So there's somebody, a creator, that created the cause for that tree. Okay? So the other minds that the creator creates, like human beings, doesn't matter what they think, that tree is going to be there. Okay, but here's how he extends that thought. An object is known or unknown depending on whether or not the mind gets colored by it. Okay, remember the crystal mind? And you bring something to it, it gets colored by it. Now, so we get some very interesting speculations here being answered. Number 18. Due to his changelessness, who's he, his, it refers to the Purusha. Changes in the mind stuff are always known to the Purusha, who is its Lord. Okay, so here's the setup. The Purusha is changeless. And sometimes it's in the agrarian blacksmith's forge. The anvil is compared to the truth, and the Purusha is the truth, so it's changeless. So because the Purusha is changeless, any changes in the mind are seen by the Purusha. Here's what Satchidananda says. Here Patanjali speaks of the changes in the mind stuff. The chittam, okay, it's a special part about chittam means knowledge, to know. So chittam is the storage of knowledge in some way. Changes constantly because that is its natural tendency. Mind is part of the ever-changing nature. And you see that all the time. You change your mind even about what you think is true. Therefore, our aim is not to keep the mind peaceful, but to rise above the mind and realize the ever-peaceful self. Purusha is the owner of the mind stuff. So the who you are owns the mind. It's Lord. He knows all the changes that happen to it. Okay, because he's always the eternal witness. How can he know them if he also is changing? A changing thing cannot recognize changes in something else. And so he gives an example, like an insane person cannot recognize the insanity of another person. So Purusha, being changeless, can always recognize the changing nature of the mind. Okay, and he goes further on in 19 and says, the mind stuff is not self-luminous because it is an object by the Purusha. Okay, good example is when the Purusha looks away from the mind and the body passes away. So he's saying that you need to recognize, understand, and emotionally understand the statement that the Purusha is separate from the mind. And when you take that to its ultimate conclusion, that is what liberation is. Okay, number 20, in order to prove that the mind is not self-luminous, the mind stuff cannot perceive both subject and object simultaneously. Okay? Which proves that the mind is not self-luminous. Okay. Number 21, there's a little bit of, so a little comment before I go into it. You have a mind, I have a mind. But the Purusha is common to both of us. Even though our minds differ, the Purusha that is observing everything through both minds is the same. If the perception of one mind by another mind be postulated, so if I can see your mind and you can see another mind, there's the memories and all these minds are different, so that they're a confusion of memory. Okay, and there are examples. Vashista's yoga goes through one of them with the four kings. The one king that became four. The king of the north, south, and east, and west. Number 22. So remember, I told you this was all mental stuff, right? Okay, here's more of it. The consciousness of the Purusha is unchangeable. By getting the reflection of it, the mind stuff becomes conscious of the self. So, this is the start of self-realization. The mind stuff reflects the Purusha and takes on some of the qualities of the Purusha. Here we go. Number 23. The mind stuff, when colored by both seer and seen, understands everything. Didn't you just learn that in chapter 3, the Samyana process? Here it is. You go into the state of Samadhi and you extend that state to other things. And that means that you actually can see, so the city is really seeing part of the Purusha. Okay, number 24. So, although the mind has countless desires, the mind stuff itself exists for the sake of another, the Purusha, because it can act only in association with it. Remember, I said if the Purusha looks away, the mind disappears. The body dies. Number 25. Okay, it's this realization that the mind can only act in association with the Purusha, but to one who sees the distinction between the mind and the Atman, thoughts of mind as the Atman cease forever. Okay. So all that thought process that you thought was you, that gets discarded. And you're only left with the thought that the mind and the Purusha are different. 26. And because the mind enjoys things, the peace that comes from this increases desire of the mind stuff, and it is inclined towards discrimination and gravitates towards absoluteness. So it doesn't happen right away. It takes a little bit of time. Number 27, in between. So you're in the process and you're gravitating towards the absolute, and obstructions and obstacles come up due to past impressions, past karma. They can be, number 28, they can be removed as in the case of obstacles explained before. See Book 2, Sutras 1, 2, 10, 11, and 26. Okay? Okay. So one of the important milestones is coming in number 29. Okay, so your mind is separated from the Purusha, and the mind says, yes, I know I'm no longer the Purusha. I know that who I am is really sitting inside me as the void, the quiet, that watches everything that goes on in the mind. He who, the jiva that has separated the mind from the Purusha, due to his perfect discrimination what? To see how the mind is separated, is totally disinterested even in the highest rewards. He remains in that constant discriminative discernment. It has a name, which is called Dharma Mega Samadhi, the cloud of Dharma Samadhi. Okay, so this is one of the highest states you can reach. Dharma Mega Samadhi, that means that wherever you go, the cloud of Dharma surrounds you. And you're happy. You're not ecstatic, you're just happy. And the happiness, cannot be interrupted. Why? Because things come along and you don't get in, your mind doesn't really get upset because it's always looking at that Purusha in some way. Okay. So Satchidananda goes into a long discussion how you long for the book. He talks about Saint Thirumulor, who was a South Indian saint. Even with God, please be without desire. That means that desire itself is a bondage. So this is one of the last vestiges of the mind to go. Ultimately, even the desire to get God should go. Then only will you have God. When will that desire go? When you get God. So you want God, and you want God, and you want God, and eventually you get God. So now that you've got God, what happened to the desire to get God? It goes. Okay, so here Swami Satchidananda continues. It's kind of a tricky thing. The fulfillment of desire, becoming desireless, happens simultaneously. It's something like saying, I want to sleep, I want to sleep. At one point you fall asleep. Only when the thought, I want to sleep, goes do you sleep, finally. So this Dharma Mega Samadhi cannot be attained by your effort. Although you put all your efforts up to a certain point, when you really reach that point, even the effort goes away and it becomes effortless. At that point, further effort will only keep you down. Okay, so he gives a little tip here. When we reach this stage, there is no harm in having certain good wants to help us stay away from the so-called undesirable wants. Then when you are able to eliminate the undesirable ones, it's easy to eliminate the good ones. He talks about soap as being good dirt. So he gives an example of something that's not working. To give an example, even our government is making this mistake in its approach to curing heroin addicts. They prescribe methadone to push away the heroin. It works, but what remains? It works, but what remains? Methadone addiction, of course. Then you will need something else to push out this addiction. It becomes a vicious cycle. Okay. When you get Dharma Mega Samadhi, all your desires are answered in some sort of way because of this underlying Samadhi. That is your natural state. And 30, okay, so this is the conclusion of that. From that Dharma Mega Samadhi, all afflictions and karmas cease. So he talks about Parabrahma karma still being present. Well, and so this is the natural order of things progressing to its final conclusion for the mind and body. Well, maybe yes, maybe no. So there is a discussion that even at the state of the Jiva Mukta, even the Parabrahma some karma is even gotten rid of. And the way that they talk about it actually says, okay, you have this samadhi, and everything that you did in the past and are going to do in the future is only a confirmation of that samadhi anyway. So your outlook on it has completely changed. The mind no longer sees that as an obstruction. Okay, the mind may be happy or sad, but it knows that it is not the jiva. So it's a little bit funny to talk about it. You know, it really does have to be experienced. Okay, number 31. Because in 30, all afflictions and karma cease, 31 says, then all the coverings and impurities of knowledge are totally removed. That happens, but even before that happens, because you're swimming in the Dharma Mega Samadhi, whenever a thought comes up that covers up the Samadhi, it just evaporates. It's sort of like the sun gets turned on it and it gets dried up. And okay, so we'll talk about what a Jiva Mukta can do. It says that he can know everything. Well, yes. But if you have to factor in the time element, okay, when you read the stories about the people that can go into a samadhi and see what happened, they don't apprehend what happened right away. But they can go into samadhi and know whatever they need to know for the situation they're in. And they can get as granular as they want. Then all the coverings and impurities of knowledge are totally removed. Because of the infinity of this knowledge, what remains to be known is almost nothing. Well, if you want to know, go ahead. You don't know, but maybe you don't need to know either. And so this is a sort of a need-to-know basis. Okay, number 32. Then the gunas terminate their sequence of transformations because they have fulfilled their purpose. Their purpose of going through the gunas and the changes that they do is to make you realize that you are not connected to the gunas. You're not connected to the mind, which is an outcome of the gunas in a way. Okay, so here's what Satchidananda says at the end of this to talk about that. I will give an analogy So, and then what happens to Prakriti? Okay, the natural order. I'll give an analogy to explain it. Imagine a mama with a number of children. They all go out to play and get dirty. When they return, totally covered with grime, she puts them into the bathroom and turns on the shower. Of course, she can't clean everybody at the same time, so she washes them one by one. Once a baby is clean, what will she do with it? She takes it out of the tub and says, "Go get dry and hop into bed." Will she stop working? No, there are still more dirty children in the tub. Mother Prakriti is just like that. She stops functioning with the child that was clean. Okay, you are clean. To go and don't come to me again. My job is over with you. But I still have a lot of work to do with the other children. That is what is meant in this sutra. Prakriti, the qualities in their continuous transformation, stop their action on the free soul because they have fulfilled their purpose. They have given enough experience to the Purusha. So that means that's the end of karma, doesn't it? Okay, 33. Okay. The sequence, okay, so the end of karma and the transformations that go on means an uninterrupted succession of moments which can be recognized at the end of their transformations. So you don't recognize this until you're finished. Oh, that's no longer happening. I'm just doing. And the mind and the body will suffer, but I'm not them anyway. Okay, number 34. This is the last sutra. Okay. Then the supreme state of independence manifests when the gunas reabsorb themselves into Prakriti. Okay, so you're now, the Purusha, have always been outside of the Prakriti. The Prakriti is just a manifestation of God or Brahman. So the gunas which were affecting the Purusha, it seemed, while it was attached to the mind, they still continue affecting the mind and the emotions and everything else. But you're not them. They reabsorb themselves into Prakriti. So you can actually see as the Purusha that the gunas no longer affect you. And even the mind and the karma associated with the body get transformed by that vision. The gunas reabsorb themselves into Prakriti, having no more purpose to serve the Purusha, or to look from another angle. The power of pure consciousness settles in its own pure nature. Pure consciousness settles in its own pure nature. So the Purusha doesn't go out anymore. It just stays there.